Okay.
So now last week you wrote a piece about the importance of observing the Sabbath. So I think in December you talked about Shabbat, which it's a tradition they still follow. And although we're not Jewish, that struck a chord, the importance of having a day a week away from the world. Why did that stick with you?
I think there's multiple reasons that it stuck with me. And I think the one is because we are so super connected and hyper connected to everything and everyone around us. I was just listening to a podcast the other day where someone said that just having your phone in the same room as you steals mental space and causes distraction. So it's just like the subliminal, continuous level of connection all the time. And I think when I wrote the letter, I was actually on holiday or on leave with my family, and I realized how amazing it is to just put everything aside. So we didn't have cell phone signal. There was no television. It just was us. And I realized how important it is to actually buy out that time more regularly because we had such interesting conversations. It's like I got to know my kids on a completely different level. And I think often, because of the nature of the type of work that you and I do, we work with people and we are super connected to what is happening around us. And we often put out I want to say, we stick out our hand and say, well, if you do need help, we're here.
The invitation is always
the invitation
there.
is always there. And people do take us up on the invitation sometimes. And because of our sense of responsibility, so knowing both you and my strength finder high on responsibility, we have this sense of we have to be there for people all the time. But it made me think about who are the first people I should be looking after. And then everyone else circles out from there. And that was pretty much where the thought came from. But I just loved the way that it was actually depicted in how they explained the principle in terms of, which are the pillars and the foundational elements that we cannot leave behind. And that really stuck with me.
So going up, honoring the Sabbath is one of the 10 commandments, and we grew up with that. And Sunday is always a different type of day. And as a kid, I always found that incredibly boring because why would you waste a day? You have to go to school for 5 days. Saturday, typically, we would do things, we would clean the garden or whatever, and there's sport and stuff. But then Sunday is another opportunity to do something fun. And my parents typically didn't. They typically left that aside. We would spend it with family. There would be no work. There would be no going to stores and types of things. And I thought, why? Why would you be so stupid to waste that? And then, when we started working with grown-ups, the type of work that we do, working with people that are constantly on, you see what the impact is on them and their capability and their mental health, and how much people suffer as a result of just always being available and on and working and available to the world. And every day feels like the same type of day. And we suffer as a result of it.
Definitely. I remember my parents never used to let me do homework on a Sunday. So I had to make sure my homework was done before Sunday. Otherwise, that would be absolutely a no-go and I would get into trouble on Monday. But I think when you say it the way you say it, it really is the main reason many people come to speak to us. And when they often come to us about quite big issues or big challenges that they're experiencing at work or in life, and we start asking very foundational questions around, are you looking after your rest? Are you sleeping? Are you spending time in nature? Are you meditating? Are you breathing? Are you, doing the things that matter? Are you taking creative rest? Are you taking time away from bright lights? And immediately the answer to all those questions tend to be no. And then we wonder why we're not coping with the demands of life. But I don't think we were made to be always on and always switched on. I think there's a lot around, building in rest in different levels all the time. So whether or not you are going to observe the Sabbath is not really the question. The question is very much about how do you build rest in to your everyday life. And We've even worked in organizations where we've had a lot of opportunity to help them change the way they structure their work to include rest in their day. Recently, one of our clients actually built in a lounge where people can take a break from their desk. So even just to go and sit on a different chair, where there's beautiful things to look at, is a form of rest, and we neglect that. We think that rest equals sleep, and that is not what it is. And most people aren't even getting enough sleep. So now you know how depleted we really are if we're not getting enough sleep and we're not looking after any of the other pillars of rest. We typically aren't going to function as well as we should.
I think we forget that we are living animals. We are biological things first. And you don't see my dogs constantly being awake and barking and carrying on. They sleep a lot in order to be the best dogs they can be. And then we think we can go without.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the types of rest we need. So you mentioned sleep. I think that is the most obvious one.
Yes, and it's passive. So
which is typically ignored, and it is the foundation of health and sanity and performance. That is where it starts. It's the most simple thing. We all need at least 7 hours of sleep. A lot of people think, nah, not me, I'm special. Most of us are not that special.
But I also think sleep is such an in-depth and there's so much information around it. But I think there are a few core principles that people can hold on to. One is get enough sleep before 12 at night. We neglect that sleep, and that's almost our most important restorative sleep. So it's not just about getting enough sleep, it's about getting the right sleep. And then having a nice sleep environment, making sure that you look after your environment in which you go to bed. Don't work in your room if you can avoid it. Don't have technology in your bedroom if you can avoid it. Create a nice dark and comfortable space for you to sleep in. Those kinds of things are good principles in terms of quality of sleep. So it's not just quantity, because most students will tell you, but I got 10 hours of sleep. I went to bed at 1 and I got up at the next day at 12.
11 or whatever.
And I'm like, okay, but that's not the right kind of sleep, and you're probably passed out because of all the alcohol consumption. But regardless, I think that sleep is very important. But another one that is also a form of very important in terms of your passive or your active rest is your stretching and yoga. I think you don't necessarily have to follow yoga principles to be able to stretch and breathe, but those things are super important, because most of the time we go through our day so rushed that we don't even focus on deep breaths. So our nervous system is shot all the time because we're telling it, you need to go, 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 go. So just taking some time to stretch your body. Massage therapy, for example, also, not many of us have the luxury of being able to go for a massage, but there's a lot of fantastic tools that you can use, foam rollers, all of those kinds of elements to also look after that element of rest. And I think that's just really looking at the one part. There's a lot of different forms of rest. I mean, we've got creative rest, which is spending time doing something creative, looking at pretty things, looking at stuff that we like to look at. I know PJ is a big fan of magazines that have pretty things in, like houses and interior and how these things can be put together. I love cookbooks. I love paging through cookbooks. Even if I don't make all the food, I love looking at how beautifully the food looks. And that's why it inspires and it does create a form of rest. So those are two that are top of mind that I think are really, really important. But there's so many other ones. I mean, we've got 9 that we kind of focus on. The other one that comes to mind, something that my 2 kids are playing outside. And I think it's something that we've neglected, is how to just have fun with no expectation, no preconceived idea of what fun needs to be, just to be and play. We've forgotten how to do that as adults. I think we touched on it last week as well, but I think it's still relevant in terms of rest. Yeah, those are 3 that I'd like for your opinion on the others.
So I'm lucky that I stay in a very beautiful environment. Table Mountain is just out that window behind me. And I'm one of the few people in Cape Town that still notices the fact that it's a beautiful place to stay, I think. And I go to the beaches often as I can, just to take it in and to see. Where I grew up, it does not look like this. So it is definitely a calming type of experience to be able to do that. The other types of rest, let me just find them. I've got them so we can be
spending time in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
And away from bright lights.
Mental rest is another one. Taking breaks from meetings, for example, or when there's stuff on your mind, writing it down, things you need to remember, so you don't have to keep thinking about things, to give your central processor some time to rest as well.
I really like the fact that one takes breaks in between meetings. I think specifically with the work environment that has shifted, and we've had our session around remote work, but with people working remotely, it's so easy to have virtual sessions back to back with no break in between. And you need that break in between. I think in a traditional setup where there's meetings, you at least have time walking from one meeting room to another meeting room, and you can just, take a nice deep breath, or at least grab a glass of water or something. When we're in these online meetings, we tend not to have that. So it's so important to just create space in your diary. And that's something we need to take responsibility for, to manage our diaries and to make sure that we actually do have that gap to take a deep breath and move away from the light that is so overstimulating to our central nervous system.
The next one is sensory rest, which speaks to just being away from all the things that put strain on your senses. So it might be things you look at, it might be things you listen to, it might be noise, it might be demanding with a lot of notifications happening and Teams messages and WhatsApp and phone calls and things. Just being away from that. I always, when I say to talk to people about this, is go take a bath and just make sure the world stays outside. And put your head below the water, because nothing's going to bother you there. Just give your body a break from all the things that are vying for your attention. And if you think of all the things that are there that we could pay attention to in a normal day, it's an enormous amount of information vying for our attention.
Yeah, and I think it's important to protect that space, because if you're not going to protect it, someone else is going to take it. So it's important to create that space. And I being a mom of 2 kids that are quite young,
did you forget how many kids you have? They feel like 4, but it's only 2.
Sometimes it feels like 4. But I think it's important to notice that they also need to learn from us. And it's hard to sometimes create that space for yourself because you feel selfish, and mom guilt is such a real thing. So you think, oh, I can't take a bath on a nice slow bath. I need to get things done. But it's so important to show them that buying out the time to look after your body is important. I mean, they've got their own yoga mats, for example, and they pull them out when we do our stretches, and they come jump in, and they've already become so accustomed to doing it. And there's such fantastic tools that one has to actually help them, to make it fun for them as well. And it's become a bit of a practice in our house to at least do that once or twice a week. But it's something that we're embedding a skill that they can utilize when they're older. And I think a lot of adults haven't made the time, because the first excuse I usually get when I speak to people about, are you resting enough, is I don't have time to rest. I need to go. And I'm like, and then when the world stands still, there's nothing left of you. So it's so important to create that space in various ways for yourself. I mean, I know people that love gardening, and that's their safe space. They love going into the garden and spending time in nature, and the healing properties of spending time in greenery and around nature is so good for you. So it is important to look after all those elements. But I think for me personally, spending time with my family is like the best form of rest for me. But then it's not in the normal environment. It's doing things that are outside of our normal environment.
Emotional rest is another one, where you have the space to say what you actually feel. So if you are in environments where you need to bottle up a lot, that takes a lot of energy to put up a front, to wear a mask. And you need somewhere to be able to say, this is what I actually think and feel, where it is possible for people to be accepting, not just in terms of complaining, but just to be free, to just let it out and not have to put up a front.
Always when I speak about this, I draw the analogy of kids coming back from kindergarten or from daycare or whatever, or school, and then the teacher goes, "Oh, your kid's amazing. They're so well behaved." And when they get home, like the wheels come off. in terms of their emotions. And I think that's exactly what happens with adults. We've just learned to kind of deal with it and bottle it up. So we don't, because we've learned to, I hope we've mostly learned how to regulate our emotions. But in the process of learning to regulate, a lot of us actually learn to suppress instead of to let it go. And I think that's something that I've recently really spent a lot of time thinking about, is how do I allow myself to feel the emotion and to be authentic about my emotions in a safe space without getting stuck in the emotion. And I think that's something that you notice it so clearly with kids because they haven't learned how to regulate as yet. But with adults, the suppression becomes such a big issue because later on, you feel highly strung. You feel like you've got all these emotions bottled up inside of you. So we've also noticed that we are lucky, I think, to have people in our environment that we can speak to, and I think there's amazing platforms that have created space to make mental health and mental facilities more available to people where they can go and speak and have access to counselors and coaches and all these elements. But I think there's a lot of people that don't have it. And in lieu of that, I think it's an important thing to investigate how can I create relationships where I can have that freedom, where I can be authentic and where I can share, and really maybe just referring back to our podcast or our webinar on the useless friends, where we spoke about how do you create and make sure you're investing in those relationships. And it actually only takes 8 minutes. It takes 8 minutes to actually just show someone you're actually listening to them. So being that friend is also a nice way of filling that gap.
That's what friends are for.
Mm.
Another form, social rest, which is a cool one because it speaks about exactly what you said now. It leads to friendship. But being around people that fill you up, people that are positive and supportive and that make you feel better. Because it's easy to think of people that make you feel the reverse, people that nag, people that are negative, people that complain a lot. They drain you. They don't make you feel rested. So having those people to go to, and I can think of people immediately when I think of that, where when you spend time with them, you feel better. You feel like, man, I've got hope for the future. Those people are important. We need them in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. So I think.
And then the last one is, you want to say something about that first?
No, carry on.
The last one is spiritual rest. We need to take care of our inner being as well, whether that is in a faith community or through prayer or through community contribution. It is being in contact with something bigger than yourself. Yeah. Because life gets very draining, I believe, when we put ourselves in the center of it. And if we only look at life as I'm the main character and everything is about me, it becomes quite all-consuming and draining. But if we can just step outside of seeing ourselves as the center of everything and being part of something bigger, that puts things in perspective. And it gives you the reassurance that my problems are not the biggest things in the world. And you often get perspective from that, makes things more manageable. And it makes the challenges we face often seem a bit smaller, which I think is very, very useful.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think in a nutshell, it's nice to have this layout of what rest looks like. But I think it's also about being mindful and understanding what you need and when you need it. Listen to your body's cues, listen to how you're feeling, allow emotions to be there, not suppress them, experiencing emotions, creating space for that as well. But also just really focusing on the basics. I mean, if you're just going to focus on at least getting your sleep and good quality sleep, you're really going to be in a better position. But then spending time with quality time with your loved ones. It's not about spending hours and hours with them, but at least buying out the time to spend quality time together. That is super important. So I think in a nutshell, that's really the focus. It's how do I buy out time, whether it be on a Saturday, Sunday, Friday, or whether it be every day, a little bit, to make sure that I'm looking after myself holistically and looking after the ones around me, then we are winning.
That is a good, quick chat. Thank you.
Thank you.